A Certain Magical Index, Vol.1, Ch.2. The Miracle Worker Grants Death, the Seventh Edge. Part 1. It was night. The sirens of fire trucks and police cars blared through the main road before passing on. The student dormitory had apparently been close to empty, but setting off the alarms and sprinklers had quickly drawn a large crowd of fire trucks and curious bystanders alike to the scene. After disabling the hood transmitter in his apartment, Kamijo carried it out. He could have left it functional and thrown it out somewhere random to try and throw off her pursuers, but she stubbornly insisted on keeping it. He came to an alley and let out a He still cradled the blood-soaked index in his arms. The ground was dirty, and he couldn't let it come in contact with her open wound. He also couldn't call an ambulance for her. Generally speaking, Academy City disliked outsiders. It was for this reason that the city was surrounded by a wall and under constant surveillance by 3 dedicated satellites. Even a truck attempting to park behind a convenience store needed a specific ID, or it would be denied access. Index had no identification. If she was hospitalized here, news of her presence would spread like wildfire. They were up against an entire organization, after all. If they were attacked in a hospital, it would only mean more victims. In the worst-case scenario, she would be attacked in the middle of surgery with no means of defending herself. But I can't just leave you here like this.
I'm fine, okay? If I can just stop the bleeding.
Index's voice was weak and devoid of the mechanical tone it bore during her rune lesson. Even Kamijo knew she was lying. Her wound went way beyond bandages. After fights, he usually performed first aid on himself so he wouldn't have to tell anyone about them. But even he didn't know what to do when faced with this kind of trauma. At this point, there was only one hope. He couldn't believe it, but he had no choice but to. Hey, can you hear me? He lightly slapped Index's cheek. Isn't there some kind of magic healing spell in those 103,000 books of yours? Magic, in his mind, was a bunch of attack and healing spells like in RPGs. Index herself lacked magical power, so she couldn't wield it. But if Kamijo, who used an abnormal power, had her walk him through it, maybe... Her breathing was shallow, likely more of a result of blood loss than pain. Her pale lips moved in reply.
There is, but...
He experienced a moment's elation right up to the butt.
You wouldn't be able to.
She exhaled a little.
Even if I taught you the technique and you performed it perfectly.
She groaned.
Your power would get in the way.
Kamijo looked at his right hand, speechless. The Imagine Breaker. It had completely dispelled Styles' flames, so it might end up nullifying the healing magic too. Damn it, not again! This stupid hand! He had to call someone then. Maybe Blue Hair, or maybe that bitty girl Mikoto Misaka. A few faces came to mind, tough ones who could handle trouble like this. Index was silent for a moment.
No, that's not what I meant.
Huh?
It's not your right hand. It's because you're an Esper.
She explained, her body shivering despite the sweltering heat as if she was on a wintry mountain.
Magic isn't meant to be used by Espers like you. Magic, its techniques and rituals are for those without gifts, who still want to achieve what those blessed with talent can.
He fought the urge to shout out, "Why are you lecturing me now?"
Do you understand? The circuits in those who have talent and those who don't are different. Someone with abilities can't use a system created for those without it.
What? Who's at a loss? Espers like him acquired their supernatural endowments by forcing their irregular brain circuits to open, using drugs and electrical stimulation. Their bodies actually were fundamentally different. But he couldn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. There were 2.3 million people living in Academy City, and every single one of them was taking a curriculum for developing their powers. Even if a person didn't look like one, and even if he or she couldn't bend a spoon despite straining his or her brain to the point of aneurysm, that only meant that the person was a useless Esper and was still built differently than normal people. In other words, there wasn't a single person in the city capable of applying the magic she could teach to him or her. There was a way to save this girl, but nobody to help her. God damn it! Kamijo gritted his teeth like a beast. This is insane! There's no way! What the hell is this? Why is this happening? Index was shaking badly. The thought that plagued him the most was that she was about to pay the price for his own powerlessness. What is this talent good for? He spat. He couldn't even save an isolated, suffering girl. But it wasn't like he could think of anything else. None of the 2.3 million students living in the city could use magic. It was a fundamental incompatibility. Huh? Lamenting this, Kamijo realized he was looking at it wrong. Students? Hey, you said that a normal person with no talent could use magic, right?
Huh? Yeah.
And there's no catch, like you have to have magical talent specifically, right?
No, it's fine. If you prepare the method, then I think even a middle schooler would be capable.
Index thought for a moment.
Oh, of course, if you mess up the steps, your brain circuits and nerves will all get fried. But I'm Index, so it's okay. There's no problem.
He grinned. Like a wolf preparing to howl, he looked up at the moon. It was true that the 2.3 million students living in Academy City were all undergoing development for their supernatural abilities. But, on the other hand, the ones who were developing those powers, the teachers, should just be normal humans. That teacher can't be sleeping yet. One teacher's face floated into Toma Kamijo's mind. His homeroom teacher, a single 135-centimeter tall instructor who, though she was an adult, looked good in an elementary school backpack. Komoe Tsukuyomi. He used a public phone to call Blue Hair to ask where Miss Komoe lived. His phone, of course, had been ruined this morning. Why Blue Hair would have a clue where their teacher lived? Unknown. Likely stalker. Afterward, he set off, hoisting the limp Index on his back. Here we are. It was about a 15-minute walk from the alley. How should I put it? Despite Miss Komoe looking like a 12-year-old, her place was a wooden 2-story wreck of an apartment that looked so old it could have survived the bombings of Tokyo. After he noticed the washing machine outside next to the road, he figured there wouldn't be any indoor showers or baths. Normally, Kamijo would be able to crack jokes about this place for 10 minutes, but at the moment, he wasn't in the mood for levity. He ascended the terribly rickety metal stairwell and checked the nameplates on the doors one by one. He walked to the farthest entrance on the second floor and finally found the name Tsukuyomi Komoe written in hiragana. He rang the doorbell twice, then tried with all his might to kick the door in. Kamijo's foot collided with the doorframe, producing a tremendous noise. However, the entry didn't budge, not even a little. His big toe cried out in protest. His faithful rotten luck was still by his side.
Yes, the door is tough to defend against newspaper salesmen. I'm opening it now, okay?
I should have just waited patiently, he thought, tears in his eyes. The ingress opened, and Miss Komoe, clad in baggy green pajamas, poked her head out. Her face was relaxed. She probably couldn't see the wound on Index's back from there.
Wow, hello, Kami. Did you start a paper route?
Where on earth do paperboys carry nuns on their backs when they go out soliciting? Kamijo demanded angrily. I've got a bit of a problem here, so I'm coming in. Excuse me.
Ooh, wait.
He tried to squeeze past Miss Komoe, but she frantically blocked his path.
I would like you to stay out. Well, I mean, it's not like there's a huge mess or there are empty beer cans on the floor or a mountain of cigarette butts or anything like that.
Miss?
What is it?
Try telling that joke again after you see what I'm carrying on my back.
It wasn't a joke. Wait, yeah!
You just realized now?
I couldn't see your injury because you're so big, Kami.
Miss Komoe was rattled, flustered by the unexpected sight of blood. Kamijo pushed past her and made his way into the apartment. The room looked as if an old man addicted to horse racing lived there. A ton of overturned beer cans lay scattered all over the old tatami flooring, and a mountain of cigarette butts was piled in a silver ashtray. He didn't know what kind of joke this was, but in the middle of the room sat a tea table that an angry drunk would love to upend. What can I say? You weren't joking after all, were you?
It might seem strange for me to ask, but do you dislike women who smoke?
That isn't the issue here, Kamijo thought, sizing up his homeroom teacher, who looked all of 12. He kicked some of the random beer cans on the floor to one side and cleared a space. There was no time to get a futon to spread over the battered tatami, though he had reservations about putting Index on it. He rested Index face down so her open wound wouldn't touch the filthy floor. The torn fabric made it difficult to see the laceration directly, but a deep red seeped from it like crude oil.
Shouldn't we call an ambulance? There's a phone right over there, you know.
Trembling terribly, Miss Komoe pointed to a corner of the room. For some reason, it was a black rotary dial phone.
My life force, my mana, is ebbing away with the blood loss.
Startled, Kamijo and Miss Komoe looked at Index. She was still on the floor, her limbs sprawled across the tatami. Her face rested on its side, but her eyes were open, not unlike a broken doll's. They were colder than pale blue moonlight, quieter than a clock's gears. Her gaze was perfectly calm, calmer than any human eyes should have been.
Warning, mana drainage via blood loss has reached critical levels. Forcing awakening by automatic clerk John's pen. If the current state continues, calculated using International Standard Time displayed as per Big Ben in London, my body's mana levels will fall below required minimum in approximately 15 minutes, and I will die. Please follow the instructions I am about to give and take appropriate measures.
Miss Komoe, her heart in her throat, looked at Index's face. It's only natural, thought Kamijo. This was the second time for him, but he certainly wasn't used to that voice. Now then. He studied his teacher's face, lost in thought. If he suddenly asked her something like, "Please use magic!" In this situation, she would answer,
Kamijo, this is an emergency. We can't make believe we're magical girls. Teacher is too old for this.
How on earth should he explain the situation then? Teacher, I'll keep this short because it's an emergency. I need to tell you a secret, so come over here.
Okay.
Kamijo gestured that she should come, as if he was calling a puppy. She drew closer, utterly earnest. I'm sorry. Kamijo mouthed an apology to Index. With one swift motion, he unveiled the horrendous wound concealed beneath her shredded clothing. Miss Komoe's body quaked. That was to be expected too. Despite being the one pulling off the fabric, even he was shocked by the severity of the injury. It was a surgical line starting near her waist, as precise as if someone wanted to use a straight edge on a box cutter. Beneath the sanguine fluid, pink muscle and yellow fat had been exposed, and still deeper, Kamijo thought he saw something hard and white, her backbone. The lips around the mouth of the wound were turning a pale blue, not unlike a person's actual lips after too long in a pool. Steadying himself from a bout of dizziness, he slowly replaced the sopping fabric. When the cloth made contact with the lesion, Index was unfazed. Her eyes were like ice. Teacher.
What is it?
I'm going to call an ambulance now. While I'm doing that, I need you to listen to what this kid has to say and do whatever she asks. Just definitely don't let her fall unconscious. As you can see, this girl is part of a religious order. I'll leave things in your hands. Telling Miss Komoe was what she needed. It would prevent her from denying magic altogether. In any case, what was important wasn't that his teacher treat the injuries properly anymore. It was to keep Index talking no matter what. Miss Komoe's face was still pale, and she nodded with a grave seriousness. The one problem was how Kamijo would waste time outside. If he called an ambulance before the ritual was complete, the treatment would be interrupted. This meant he couldn't call for paramedics. But that left him without a reason to excuse himself. He could always use the black phone in the room, dial 117, and pretend to ask the automated voice for an ambulance. That wasn't the problem. Hey, Index. Kamijo prompted softly. Is there anything I can do?
Not possible. The best course of action in this situation is for you to evacuate the area.
He involuntarily clenched his right hand into a fist to the point that it hurt, at her completely transparent and straightforward answer. There was nothing he could do. His mere presence was enough to nullify the healing spell. Okay, teacher. I'm gonna go run to a public phone.
What? Kami, there's a phone right over there.
He ignored her and left the room. He bit down on his teeth, frustrated with himself for being unable to help. Kamijo sprinted through the darkened streets. Despite being the man who could kill even God, his right hand couldn't protect a single person.
What is the current Japanese Standard Time? I would also like to know the date. It's July 20th, 8:30 in the evening. But why?
Index paused.
Do not appear to have a checked clock, so are you certain that is the correct time? There isn't a clock here in the first place. Teacher's internal clock is a second hand, so there's no problem. There's nothing to be skeptical about. In fact, I hear horse jockeys have their internal clocks fine-tuned down to the 10th of a second. If you regulate your eating and exercise habits exactly, you can manage it.
Miss Komoe explained matter-of-factly. Even though she wasn't an Esper, she was certainly a resident of Academy City. Everyone here had a unique understanding of science and medicine compared to the outside world. Index, still face down on the floor, moved only her eyes and looked out the window.
Judging by the star's position and the angle of the moon, the location of Sirius matches your time with a margin of error of 0.038. I will now confirm. The current Japanese Standard Time is July 20th at 8:30 p.m., correct? Yes, more precisely, it's 53 seconds after that. Hey, wait, you shouldn't get up!
Index rose, compromising her shattered body even further. Miss Komoe, panic-stricken, tried to push her back to the floor, but one glance from Index stopped her in her tracks. The gaze was neither scary nor sharp. It was as if her eyes had flipped a switch. Gone was any trace of emotion. They were completely devoid of life. It was as if her soul had departed her body.
It does not matter. Regeneration is possible.
Index headed for the tea table in the center of the room.
We are in the end of Cancer for half of the night, from 8 o'clock to midnight. Cardinal direction is west. Under Undine's protection, the angel's role shall be Hailwime.
Komoe caught her breath, startled. Her quiet cry echoed throughout the room. Index had begun drawing a diagram of some sort on the tea table with her blood-soaked finger. Even if Miss Komoe didn't know what a magic circle was, she could tell it was something religious. She was faint-hearted, unable to utter even a sound. She stared at the sigil, feeling overwhelmed. Inside the circle of blood, which took up the entire tea table, was a pentagram. However, it was bordered by tightly packed words in a language that belonged to another country. They were likely the same words Index was currently muttering to herself. She had asked for the current constellation and time because the characters that needed to be inscribed were dependent on the time and season. Her movements as she conjured this magic betrayed none of the frailty of a person suffering grievous injury. Her concentration seemed to have sequestered her sensation of pain for the time being. The quiet sound of blood dripping from her back sent a chill down Miss Komoe's spine.
What is that?
Magic.
Index replied hollowly.
From this point, I will borrow your hands and body. If you do as I direct, no one will need to deal with any misfortune, and you will avoid any malice.
What are you talking about? Just lie back down on the floor and wait for an ambulance. Bandages. Where are the bandages? The laceration this severe. We should stop the flow of blood by binding the area near the arteries.
It is impossible to wholly arrest my blood loss with that degree of treatment. I do not quite understand the meaning of the word ambulance, but can that completely staunch this wound within 15 minutes and further replenish my body with the requisite amount of mana?
She was right. If Komoe was to call an ambulance now, it would take 10 minutes to get there. Bringing her back to the hospital would take twice that, and it wasn't as if she would be healed the moment they arrived. She didn't really understand what the girl meant by the occult term mana, but there was no doubt that just closing the gash wouldn't replenish her stamina. Even if she immediately sutured the trauma with a needle and thread, the pallid thing would lose all her strength and die before she could recover her vitality, wouldn't she?
Now, please.
Index issued her instruction, her eyes inscrutable. A thin line of saliva tinged with fresh blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Though her tone had been neither commanding nor ghastly, her very sedate composure made the girl all the more terrifying. It was like watching a broken machine moving, wholly unaware that it had been destroyed. She couldn't help but feel as if Index's wound grew more severe with every action she took.
It looks like if I resist, she'll get a lot worse.
Miss Komoe heaved a sigh. Her eyes still weren't expecting to see magic, of course, but Kamijo had made it absolutely clear that she should keep the girl talking and awake. The only thing she could do now was to try to not excite her in any way and hope that Kamijo returned with an ambulance as soon as possible, followed by a miraculous bit of triage by trained medical professionals promptly thereafter.
So what should I do? Teacher isn't a magical girl, you know.
I thank you for your cooperation. First give me that... What is that black thing?
Oh, that's a video game memory card.
Alright, that will do. Anyway, please place that black thing in the center of the coffee table.
It's more like a tea table, but okay.
As directed, Miss Komoe positioned the memory card in the center of the tea table. After that, she surrounded it with a mechanical pencil lead case, an empty box of chocolates, and 2 small books on their ends. Finally, she lined up a pair of little toy figurines.
What is this?
Wondered Miss Komoe. But Index was the picture of seriousness, although she looked poised to collapse at any moment.
What is this? You said magic, but aren't we just playing with dolls?
When Miss Komoe considered the configuration more closely, it appeared to be a miniature diorama of that very room. The memory card was the tea table, the 2 books standing on their ends were her bookshelf and closet, and the 2 figurines were positioned precisely where she and the injured girl stood in the room. Glass beads later scattered around the tea table perfectly mirrored the beer cans on the floor.
Ingredients are inconsequential. A magnifying glass can be composed of glass or plastic, but either material will facilitate closer observation. If an object's shape and function are approximate, the ceremony may proceed.
Index spoke in little more than a whisper, sweating profusely.
In any case, I request that you carry out my instructions in exact detail. Should you fail to maintain the proper order, your nerves and brain circuits may burn out.
Huh?
I mean that in the event of failure, your body will be minced and you will die. Please be careful.
Miss Komoe coughed in surprise. Index ignored her and continued.
I shall call down an angel and create a temple. Please chant after me.
What came out of her mouth next were sounds, not words. Miss Komoe attempted to imitate the pitch as if humming a tune, without dwelling on its meaning. And then... all of a sudden, the figures on the tea table began singing as well. One of them even mimicked her eek in real time. The figure vibrated. Its vibration replicated her voice in a little effigy, as if it were being transmitted along a string to a paper cup. The only reason Miss Komoe didn't completely lose it and dash out of the room was because she was a resident of Academy City, renowned home to more than 2.3 million espers. Cohabitating with more than 2.3 million espers in the city would have driven any normal person mad by this point.
Link established,
Came Index's voice in stereo, both from her own mouth and from the figure on the tea table.
The temple created on the table has been linked with this room. Essentially, anything that transpires inside this room will do so on the table, and anything that transpires on the table will do so in this room.
Index pressed lightly on one of the legs of the tea table. Concurrently, the entire apartment trembled with a loud... the impact shaking Miss Komoe's legs. It was then that she noticed that the stagnant air inside her apartment was becoming as clean and crisp as a forest morning. She didn't see anything resembling an angel anywhere, though. She could only sense some sort of invisible presence. Her skin broke out in goosebumps all over. She felt as if thousands of eyes were observing her from every angle. All of a sudden, Index shouted,
Now, imagine a golden angel with the body of a child. A beautiful angel possessed of a pair of wings.
Defining the active field was a crucial element of magic. For example, if one throws a pebble into the ocean, it doesn't create a very big ripple. However, if one drops a pebble into a bucket of water, it causes large and powerful rings. Magic was similar. First, a specific field had to be defined in order to isolate the area the magic was to distort. A guardian is a temporary deity placed within the small pre-designated world. If they could visualize a concrete guardian, stabilize it, and control it the way they wanted, mysterious manipulations would be easier to perform within the field. But Index skipped the explanations. Miss Komoe found herself unable to envision an angel. The words golden angel only brought to mind the chocolate brand where you search for the silver or gold angel in the box for a prize. As if aligning itself with Miss Komoe's fuzzy vision, the presence surrounding them steadily began losing its form. A revolting sense that she was sinking in the fetid mud at the bottom of a swamp came over her.
Anyway, picture it. We are not calling an actual angel. It is only a gathering of mana, an invisible power. Its form is dictated by your will.
Index's voice, which had been calm and mechanical before, was now as pointed as icicles. Maybe she'd reached the end of her patience. Miss Komoe shut her eyes in surprise at Index's sudden 180 and, rattled, chanted to herself.
A cute angel, a cute angel, a cute angel.
Desperately, she vaguely visualized a female angel from a girls' manga she'd read long ago. Suddenly, it felt as if the invisible muddy thing floating around the room started to coalesce, as if it were being blown into a human-shaped balloon. Miss Komoe nervously opened her eyes a bit.
Wait, we're not killing an actual angel, are we?
The very moment she doubted it. The human-shaped mudball burst, sending it spewing through the room.
Yeah!
Form stabilization has failed.
Index looked around with pointed, observant eyes.
If you can at least guard this temple with the Azure Water Undine, there will be no problem. Now proceeding.
Her words were optimistic, but her eyes weren't smiling at all. Miss Komoe couldn't help but tremble. She felt like a child who had hidden a test on which she'd performed poorly, only to be found out by her parents.
Chant after me. One last phrase and it will be over.
Index's command was sharp so as to allow no time for the teacher to panic, although her concentration was on the verge of breaking. Index, Miss Komoe, and the two figurines standing on the tea table sang. Within the diorama, the back of Index's effigy liquefied with an amorphous gurgle. It sounded like rubber being melted by a lighter. As the toy's back lost its integrity, the lines and curves vanished, becoming smooth, before ultimately cooling and reassuring their form. Miss Komoe's heart froze in fear. Index sat facing her on the opposite side of the tea table. The diminutive teacher lacked the fortitude to dare stand and examine her back. The frightening girl's pallid blue face dripped with greasy sweat. Miss Komoe couldn't glean any pain or suffering from her glassy eyes.
Confirmed replenishment of mana and avoidance of life-threatening crisis. Returning John's pen to dormancy.
Soft light suddenly returned to Index's gaze as if a switch had been flipped. A warm atmosphere enveloped the room, as if a cold hearth had been kindled. That was how the gentle and warm Index's eyes were, the eyes of just a simple girl.
Now, we'll return the Descended Guardian, destroy the temple, and it will be all over.
Index almost smiled, but her lingering pain seemed to get in the way.
That's all magic is. Just like how dog and canine have the same meaning. Even without relying on glass, we still have transparent plastic umbrellas these days. You can even use free prizes that come with shoujo manga to tell fortunes, as long as the pictures and number of cards are right.
Index was still sweating heavily. However, Miss Komoe grew even more frightened, worried that she somehow worsened Index's condition.
I'm fine.
Index looked as if she might collapse at any moment.
This is basically a cold. I just need to rest and regain some stamina, and I'll heal right up. The actual wound is already closed, so don't worry.
The moment she finished speaking, her body wavered and fell to one side. The figurine on the tea table fell over as well. The tea table shook a tiny bit, consequently rocking the entirety of the linked room with a powerful tremor. Miss Komoe was about to rush to the other side of the tea table when Index started to sing. The teacher imitated her as before, and after they had finished, the peculiar atmosphere of her apartment reassumed its familiar air. Just to make sure, Miss Komoe tried wobbling one of the table legs a little. Nothing happened.
Thank goodness.
Index mumbled, closing her eyes in relief.
Anyone would feel some relief at having survived such a close brush with death, right?
Thought Miss Komoe. However, the nun went on.
Thank goodness he didn't have to bear that cross.
Startled, she looked at Index.
If I died here, he probably would have had to bear it for the rest of his life.
Index stopped speaking and closed her eyes as if enjoying a dream. Passed out in the wake of a brutal assault, and even during that enigmatic ceremony, she had never worried for herself. The wounded girl had only been thinking about the boy who'd carried her all this way. Miss Komoe wasn't capable of that kind of selflessness. She didn't have anyone to think about that way. So she wanted to ask just one thing. Index was already asleep, so she was certain the girl wouldn't hear her question. That's why she asked. But eyes still closed, the girl answered her nonetheless.
I don't know. I've never thought about anybody in that way before, so I don't know what it feels like. But when he fought for me with no regard for his own life while facing the sorcerer, I thought that even if I had to crawl, I needed to get him away from there. But after Innocentius chased him off, when he came back for me, I was so happy, I almost cried. I don't get it at all, but when we're together, nothing ever goes the way I think it will. But that unpredictability is so fun and makes me happy. I don't understand what kind of emotion that is, though.
She smiled with her lids comfortably lowered, as if enjoying a merry dream, and this time, Index fell asleep. To read along with audio light novel or to read on your own time, buy the book. The link is in the description. Okay, this really is the last time I'm going to be reading a certain magical index for this channel. It's not like I'm even reading this for any of you in the first place. Again, I just happen to want to read index because I happen to find more audio files in my hard drive, that's all. This whole thing is too troublesome anyway. 28 minutes, really?